Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about making adventures. It's not just Dungeons and Dragons, it's not just Pathfinder, any roleplay game, it really doesn't matter. And this is all about Dungeon Master preparation. This is lesson 1 where we actually build an adventure. That's right, if you wanted some guidance around that, I'm not just going to explain it. I do more than that. So what am I going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about the types of adventures that you can create. This is the types of quests that you can give your player characters, the basic adventure building process, and then some miscellaneous recommendations. You might be looking at that and thinking, well, that's very short, Fred. Well, trust me, it's short enough. It's what you will need. Objectives. My objective is to explain the process of building your adventure and also demonstrate the process to you as well. And I also want you to participate with me, because this is the whole point of these things, is so that you actually participate in some way. Now, for those of you who don't know, on D&D Beyond they have a combat encounter builder. They are also currently working on a 3D virtual tabletop. They don't have anything around building adventures, but a few tools I thought I would, at least this tool in particular, I would point you in the direction of. Okay, let's go straight into the nuts and bolts, and that is the types of adventures. There are about 3 different types of adventure structure. And the first one is your sandbox or your hex crawl adventure. This is where the characters start at a set location, but can venture out to any new place or location they would like, and they can just explore. They can go north, south, east, west, or in between. And then the next one that is also used, and that is the linear adventure. This is where the players, characters, will start at a beginning point or a beginning location, and they follow a set path to a climax in the story. They have a very strong plot line compared to the sandbox and hex crawl. That doesn't mean that the sandbox and hex crawl doesn't have any kind of plot, but often it's just a solitary goal that you're trying to achieve. Whereas a linear adventure will probably have set plot points that you're going to move along. The third one is the point crawl adventure. This is built from meaningful locations that are connected by multiple in-world pathways. They look like a branching tree. And a linear adventure may have branches, but this is what a point crawl is. You don't have freedom to go anywhere you like, but there are a number of options. There might be 2 options from this point or location where you're starting at, or 3 options or pathways you select. Most adventures are a combination of all 3, and the reason being is that each one does something quite well that the others don't. So the 3 basic types you can combine into sandbox, linear, and point crawl. You'll find a lot of Wizards of the Coast adventures are a combination of linear and the sandbox. They very rarely use a point crawl, and so essentially you have a linear path. There may be 1 or 2 branches on it, and then from there you would get onto the train. You travel from train station A to train station B. You get off at train station B, you explore in the little sandbox, you get back on the train, and then you move to point C, or train station C. Okay, and that's basically how Wizards of the Coast builds theirs. There's nothing wrong with any of these. Location-based adventures. Now this is where your adventure is not around set plot points or events. Your adventure is all about the location itself. This is definitely how a lot of older adventures were laid out. And what you do with your location-based adventure is you have a place, and then you have a villain or potential conflict that the player characters will interact with. And that's essentially it. The actual story is written by the players rather than by the adventure itself or the dungeon master. The next one is the event-based adventure, and this is usually set out like a flow chart. There might be multiple branches or options along the way. There is usually a starting point, a set starting point, but the end result might have a couple of different options, and there might not necessarily be an unlimited number of options. So event-based is there are certain things that need to take place during your adventure, and where the Dungeon Master has to thread the line to get you to each of those vital event points. So that is the different types of adventures. But that doesn't solve the problem of actually, like, I've got to get them to do an adventure, right? There are types of quests as well. The sort of thing that you use in your game to get your players interested. And the ones that I have here, there's quite a few. I've got 8. I'm going to go through each one. You have the fetch quest. This is when the characters have to get something from another location that is potentially a long way away or a long distance away, and they have to bring it. So you're fetching something like a dog. The best example I could say of a fetch quest is Avengers Endgame, where all of the heroes have to collect up the Affinity Stones, and they then have to form a gauntlet, put the stones into the gauntlet, and then have the snap happen again and bring back everybody who disappeared. So if you've already seen that movie, great, and if you haven't and I've just spoiled it for you, I'm sorry, but I thought that was the best example that I thought that people would understand. The second one is the delivery quest, and this is where the characters are in possession of an object, a person, or a piece of information, and they must deliver it to a specific location. And probably the best example of a delivery quest is Lord of the Rings, where you take the one ring, Frodo takes the one ring to Mount Doom, has to throw it into the lava and destroy it, ultimately vanquishing the evil in the land. That is a delivery quest. Number 3 would be the protection quest. You have the characters escorting a person safely to a second location, potentially, or a set location. You might even set this protection quest in one location and they don't actually travel at all. The best example of the protection quest, I think, is the 7 Samurai, where you have 7 samurai protecting a town of villagers, or even the Magnificent Seven, which is the old western where you had some gunfighters that would protect a town from a robber baron. Also, Multiverse of Madness is a good example. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, is another good example of protecting an individual from danger. Number 4 is destroy quests or kill quests. They require a character to go on a monster hunt or vanquish a main villain or break an object, and by far the simplest way to explain what a destroy quest or kill quest is Star Wars, because almost all those stories revolve around that. We have to destroy the Death Star. We need to defeat and destroy Darth Vader or the Emperor, or we need to go and destroy the second Death Star, or Starkiller Base needs to be destroyed as well. I mean, it's very much about destroying and killing, Star Wars. Okay, next, 5. Investigation quests. This gets the characters to find new information to investigate a mystery, solve a crime or a problem. And the best example of something like this is Sherlock Holmes, where he is presented with a problem or a mystery, and he is required to solve the crime, and he does that with Dr. Watson. And so Sherlock Holmes is probably the detective is the best example of that. Number 6 is negotiation quests, which require a character to deliver or persuade someone that is going to involve diplomacy or some sort of intrigue, perhaps even trade. So we're really around deceiving somebody, persuading someone, and that's what a negotiation quest tends to be. Now, what would that look like? I think Star Trek is a good example of this, or Avatar. And I'm talking about James Cameron's Avatar, where you're trying to negotiate with the natives, and then you've got the off-worlders, the humans, who are trying to take a natural resource, and can we find some common ground? It doesn't go well, obviously. Negotiations do break down. Star Trek is very much about exploring new worlds and locations and trying to get past the differences that we have with an alien race. So that's sort of Star Trek. Number 7 is survival quests. They force a character or characters into a dangerous situation that they have to get out of. It might be a natural disaster, it might be an army on a warpath, they might be trapped in a prison. There are many ways it can look, but essentially it's survival. The best example that I can think of for this is Alien, the original Alien movie, and the Terminator movie, also done by James Cameron. So Alien is where you land on a planet, you find a strange ship and find there's eggs in here, they hatch, and suddenly you've got to survive the alien that is trying to kill everybody and impregnate its babies and everybody and sort of take over. And then, of course, there's the Terminator, the cyborg that tries to track you down by traveling through time, and essentially an indestructible machine, and you've got to find a way to survive and hopefully destroy the thing, which does eventually happen. Okay, the last one is number 8, attainment quests. This has a character seek a treasure like an object, a person, but other things could also be included. So it doesn't have to just be an object or a person. It might be political power or a political position. It might be a piece of land. It might be a castle or a structure. It can be something. And the best example I can think of for an attainment quest is Moana and Finding Nemo. With Moana, Moana is trying to find a green stone which will rid the world of the darkness that is taking over the sea. Finding Nemo is about trying to seek and find a lost baby fish named Nemo. And so it's all about an attainment. It's all about attainment and trying to seek out that particular lost fish. Those are the best examples I can think of in terms of the quests that you might have. Now that I've covered that, and there's quite a bit there, I know. Basic adventure building. What does that look like? What do you need essentially for your adventure? Well, you need to have your adventure title or designation to differentiate your session notes from something else. Now, you're not necessarily writing for a published piece of work. In fact, none of this advice is designed for that at all. It's designed around you running your own games rather than running somebody else's game, okay? So running your own adventures. So an adventure title or a designation, so it's separate from everything else. An adventure hook or an adventure goal, and if you don't have an adventure hook or an adventure goal, then you need to have at least an adventure recap for what happened last time, using maybe 3 or 4 sentences, just so that the player characters know what they're going to be doing next during this session. Okay, you'll find a lot of the adventure goals that you can utilize in your game are actually in the Dungeon Master Guide for Dungeons and Dragons 5e on page 72 to 81. You need to list the player characters and make sure you have written down the player characters' names, their class, their race, their floor, and a goal. And you want to do this in note form. So one word is good enough. Try to make nothing more than a sentence is probably too much. So one sentence does it all, and you might need to just use keywords for this. Adventure locations. I'm going to suggest you want to have a variety of different adventure locations for your adventure, and 5 in total is probably all you need for one session or one adventure, depending on its size. I'm looking in terms of a adventure you can run in one sitting. So what would you need to have? You probably want to have a village, a town, a city, or a tavern. This is usually going to be your starting location. Make sure you write down the name of the location and a basic description so you know what it is. Okay, sometimes the name doesn't tell you everything. Dungeon locations can be found in the Dungeon Master Guide for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Refer to page 99, 101, 113 to 114, and then 292 to 301. Pre-made maps and realistic historic locations can be your inspiration. I suggest you utilize them wherever possible. Now, this might also mean you need to have a separate page from your adventure, which would be your map when you draw out your map. The next thing, a list of 5 non-player characters. You want to have 5 at least. I probably wouldn't say you need much more than that. That's probably enough for a session. Otherwise, you've got too much to work with. NPC names. You want to make sure you have your NPC names. You need to have a basic appearance, a bit of personality to them, motivation, and what sort of NPCs are we trying to build? There are a couple that are pretty standard. This is your villain, your main villain. You'll probably need to have a patron or a quest giver who gives out the quest in the first place. You might have a victim if you have a victim involved in your adventure. You might have a helper, somebody who reveals information or assistance in some way throughout the adventure. And also a mentor has a similar function as the helper. But the difference between the mentor is going to be there for a lot longer. It won't be just for one single adventure. It's probably going to hang around a long time. I know the mentor and the patron can have a dual purpose in some cases. Now, any additional NPCs that you have are just extras. They are the extras in the background. You can use them as shopkeepers and other NPCs that crop up when you need to. Now, one of the best ways to actually build your NPCs is using the backgrounds in the player's handbook. See page 127 to 141 of the D&D 5e player's handbook. Backgrounds are excellent at helping you fill out those details, and I have a lesson that covers this, by the way. Creating NPC characters in your you can find a whole bunch of stuff in your Dungeon Master Guide. If you look on page 89 to 91, you'll find there is some stuff there. It's not the best. I still think the Player's Handbook's actually better than the Dungeon Master Guide. If you need villains' goals, the goals that a villain might have in your story, then I'm going to refer you to the Dungeon Master Guide. See page 94 to 95, and there's a fairly extensive table there that pretty much gives you everything you need. Now, if you're familiar with Sly Flourish, Rory's Story Cubes are also a good way. You roll 3 or 4 of these to determine the different aspects of your NPC, and that'll help sort of build them out. Okay, we've got that, but what's actually going to happen during our adventure? Like, what will they explore? What will happen? This is your encounters. I'm going to suggest that you probably need about 6 different encounters. I'm not talking about random encounters, and I'm not talking about combat encounters, and I'm certainly not talking about random combat encounters. That's different completely. That stuff you can do on the fly, okay? You don't need to put a lot of work into that. But you can have combat encounters, okay? Social interaction, so where there is a situation where there might be a discussion with an NPC or a monster or a character of some kind. Exploration, so you need to have descriptions of a location and a name of a location so that they can explore and find stuff. You want to include things like traps and puzzles. If your players like traps and puzzles and you like traps and puzzles, put them in. Skill challenges. There's all those aspects of the game. So exploration, social interaction, combat. Unfortunately, the Dungeon Master Guide for D&D 5e is very sparse on a lot of this, but you will find a little bit of information, not a lot, on traps on page 120 to 123. And unfortunately, any additional information with regard to building encounters is something you'll need to go and look at a different source for. Unfortunately, the Dungeon Master Guide isn't very good at doing that sort of thing, not for 5e anyway. The last thing is you need to have some rewards for completing or the completion of the adventure goals or aspects or stages. Now, there might be multiple rewards, there might be only some. Some of these rewards might be divvied out by exploring and finding them, the hidden and locations the players have to find and search, or they might be given as a reward for completing a task, whatever that might be, based on our different types of quests. You obviously will need to think about character advancement. Are you using experience points? Are you using milestones? It could be in terms of your rewards. Are we dealing with magic items? Are we dealing with giving them political power? Are we going to give them some other type of treasure or money? Are they going to have some sort of improved non-player character relationship that they can use later on? There's a lot of different things that you can use as a reward, but it's very important to ensure that the goal is actually a goal that players are interested in. There must be some sort of reward system involved, and often just character advancement isn't enough, but it does not necessarily have to be a magic item, by the way, for those of you who are thinking, I've got to put magic items in here. No, it can be other things. I always give out miscellaneous recommendations when I cover this sort of stuff, and my recommendations to you are the following. Don't spend all your time on developing one concept of your adventure. It's just the structure, get it done. Okay, you can put this all on one page. You do not need to sit down there and write 20 pages worth of material for your adventure. Stop sweating the creative ideas in your adventure, okay? You don't know what other people will like. Like, you don't know what your players will enjoy. You don't know what you will probably have a good idea what you enjoy, but you don't necessarily know what the players will enjoy. It's one of the things I've always found is, even though I thought my players would enjoy something, it's from my perspective, not from their perspective. So don't sweat that stuff, okay? Don't let somebody else's feedback on what you have created impact your desire to run the adventure. One of the things with an adventure is the only way to know if it's any good is to simply run it. You can't just look at the adventure and say, that's a good adventure, that's a bad adventure. Often what you'll find is it depends on the people and how you ran it, and often there's too many different factors involved. So don't beat up on yourself in terms of what you have created. Just run it, do it. Okay, that's how we get better at doing things. Okay, I hope that this was useful to you. If you have any feedback for me, put that in the comments. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. And I hope this was useful to you. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.